My father was a serial killer. Ask me anything. I won't reveal his or my identity, of course, for safety and respect for the victims' families. Strategic questions, and you could probably figure out who he was, so play fair. Not Dahmer or Bundy level, but killed at least 9 people, perpetrated many other heinous crimes. Died a few years ago, and given our culture's fixation on true crime, thought I'd offer everyone a glimpse inside of my experience and hopefully heal some of my wounds in the process. Let's go!
Man, you're doing great keeping up with the questions. Thanks for doing this. Fascinating read. I have a pretty good idea who your dad was due to a massive research project I did years back on the subject of serial killers for anyone but Op. I'm not going to say that's the OP's decision. I have a couple purely speculative questions if you don't mind. 1. Do you think having a family prevented him from killing anyone at times? 2. How do you think he felt towards you? I genuinely wonder, with most of the killers I've read about, if the lack of empathy is total or greatly diminished, but still present in some aspects. You mentioned feelings of guilt, knowing some of your best memories of him were probably the result of him having satisfied an urge and being more relaxed. Do you think that he looked back at those memories and remembered them fondly, or was it all an act?
Thank you. Have coffee in hand, and the next 2 days off work, happy to be occupied, and I pretty much counted on the super sleuths or professionals figuring it out. Appreciate the discretion. And yes, I believe he resented for that reason. At times having a family definitely restricted him and prevented some crimes. And from what I saw towards the end, I honestly think he only looked back fondly on the destruction he caused. I'm sure with your experience on the subject you know just how deeply some of these guys hated and resented existence itself. I'd like to think he remembered my mother, and I fondly, but that's more than likely wish fulfillment on my part.
How is your relationship with your mother? How is she doing now? Do you think your father had a family in order to pass as normal? I hope your romantic partners don't treat you differently when they find out. You're not him, never will be.
We're very close. She's honestly doing much better than I am with it at this point. She has her hobbies and her health and awesome sense of humor. I don't think that was the case. I was accident. He made it very clear he never wanted me, and I was a burden. And some have. I don't blame them. My last relationship, my God, I still love that woman so much, but after I told her everything I could barely look her in the eyes at times. I've learned that some of the stuffs I've gone through I have to take to the grave. One ex was worried I myself would be abusive because of this, and the last one, well, my shame ruined and inability to accept myself ultimately ended the relationship. If you ever read this, she'd be able to figure it out. I still love you, and I'm sorry I wasn't healed enough yet.
How was home life? We see families on sitcoms that are stereotypical. Can you give us a glimpse into what life was like growing up for you? Also, do you think he felt remorse?
Constantly walking on eggshells. His mood would go from calm to physically abusive at the drop of a hat. We lived in almost constant fear. We were always broke because he was so impulsive and hooked on drugs, alcohol. Some people say, oh my, we were just as shocked when we found out. I believe that the famous way of coping. We knew he was bad, just not that bad. Constantly moving because of his work and legal troubles, which looking back was probably a method he used to avoid detection.
Was your father a blue or white-collar worker? Occupation? What factors lead him to be the way he was? Did he have a dysfunctional childhood? How and when was he diagnosed with mental illnesses? Was he constantly in trouble with the law? In and out of jail, prison during his lifetime?
Constantly in trouble, in and out of jail, forced into service as punishment, and he was a contractor, fairly common trade for these guys. Incredibly dysfunctional childhood, mother was a prostitute, again another common trait. He was abused sexually, abandoned for days on end, and subjected to a lot of violence. He was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder in the army, discharged. He had drug and alcohol addiction, antisocial personality disorder diagnosed during court.
Did he ever abuse or attack women? That's not uncommon for those with that demographic that have turned into abusers or killers.
He physically abused my mom. As far I know, he never killed a woman or a child, but yes, he was abusive towards women.
He killed only men? That's very unusual.
My dad was a serial killer. Unusual is our starting off point.
What did you go through in the year following his arrest? Emotionally and physically, how did you react to finding out?
Never had any denial, oddly enough. All made too much sense when we found out. I was physically sick, as was my mother. She experienced denial though. I was angry at him, the environment that created him, and angry he had me too. Lastly, and I still feel it to this day, back-breaking weight of guilt and sorrow for the families of his victims. Nothing can be done to make right what he selfishly took from so many people, and that will forever haunt me.
Hey, I'm related to a serial killer too. Mine is my uncle. But my dad and much of my family are criminals too. By chance, do you have a problem thinking you are predisposed to being a bad person? Because that is a thought that often plagues me. Makes me feel like bad is just inherently in my blood.
Haha, very small exclusive club we're in. And yes, I know exactly what you mean. I feel inherently rotten at times for being so closely related to such a thing. Not taking it out on yourself, are you?
When you found out what your father had done, were there any loose ends or behaviors of his that you understood at that moment?
100%. He would travel for work. Before his trips he would be a violent, anxious mess. After he would be relatively calm and almost enjoyable to be around. I put it together because he had satisfied his urge. This also came with a wave of sickness and guilt, because the best times I had with my father were a result of him destroying some other family.
I wonder why he played the father role at all instead of bolting. You said you were an accident and he didn't have empathy. He could even have just paid child support if he wanted to avoid the law.
Personally, I believe it was to exert his control, and I believe it was a ploy as well to avoid suspicion. Lord knows I've asked myself that question hundreds of times. Why couldn't he just have left?
Your mother was his safe space. She was home base for him. You were pleased forgive me a byproduct of that and to keep her, what she provided for him. He tolerated you. She was probably an ideal partner for what he needed.
Was his demeanor similar to BTK? I know he's not BTK because you said he's dead, and BTK is still living. By demeanor, I mean how normal it was to him. In court, BTK talked about how he killed people in such a normal conversation, like someone who was talking about doing laundry.
Somewhat. He would talk about the horrendous stuff he did, like a hunter would describe field dressing a deer. At times he took enjoyment in everyone's disgust and fear, would occasionally smirk when hearing horrific details being read back. So detached, aloof, but at times a sick self-satisfaction.
Did you ever catch a glimpse of that before he was caught? The taking pleasure in people's disgust or fear or extreme detachment.
He would have me watch really disturbing movies as a kid, like even an adult would think WTF, and he seemed to take delight in my discomfort. Never saw that graphic and blatant before though, and yeah, it was pretty obvious he didn't give a shit about other people's circumstances.
Do you think he meant to get caught?
No, I can honestly say from our last interactions he wasn't satisfied with the level of destruction he'd caused, which is unfathomable.
2 questions. 1. How was the moment when you found out that he had been arrested? Where were you and what was the first thing you thought? 2. How did your friends and schoolmates react?
I was in school. He was supposed to pick me up but never showed. At first, I thought he just got arrested for drunk driving or drugs again. Small arrests were very common for him. The teachers were very nice and understanding. My classmates didn't really grasp the situation, however some of their parents were very supportive. Some people were rude to me, but sadly it was my mother who faced the hate, persecution for the most part.
Do you see traits of your father in yourself? Do you go to therapy?
Unfortunately, yes. I have a tendency to not worrying about consequences, some impulse control problems, and I'm a recovering alcoholic, drug addict. I picked up his capacity for charm as well, but rest assured it'll never hurt a fly. It does give me pause about having children of my own. And for second part of your question, I've tried therapy, but sometimes they end up more curious about him as a psychological experiment than treating me. In and out of therapy since 18.
Is there any chance you or your mom could have used a murder weapon without knowing it was used to kill someone?
Good question. And yes, It is possible, and morbidly enough, I'm fairly certain I used one to clean a fish. He caught me using it, and exploded in anger. One caught one hell of a beating over that. I still think about that sometimes, and have to wash my hands as a result.
Usually serial killers keep a trophy from each victim. What were his trophies? Did he keep them stashed away somewhere? Anyone ever find them prior to his arrest?
I'm not going to divulge what exactly they were. But yeah, he kept keepsakes. I found them looking for a tool to fix my bike once. Didn't think much at the time cause he was weird as hell anyways, but it clicked after the fact.
Kind of a morbid question, but did you kept them, tossed them away, or gave them to the police?
I was mortified when I found out they're either in some police evidence locker somewhere, destroyed, or possibly returned to the families.
Do you come across online articles or videos describing what he did? If so, do you avoid that stuff?
Like the plague, I've read some, and most of it is wrong. Not the criminal facts, but personal histories and descriptions of how he behaved are usually wrong. I avoid all serial killer documentaries and articles at this point.
How or who found the bodies? Did he give a full confession? Or did he plead not guilty?
Some of them still haven't been found. Initially they were found via cadaver dogs, and evidence found his possession pinned him for the methods used to kill them. When he knew the jig was up, he confessed fully and graphically.
Did you have to hear or witness that at the time? Have you chosen to watch or read transcripts of his confession?
I heard some in court, but the vivid details, they took me out of the courtroom. But I did read the transcripts a few years later. Wish I hadn't, but I needed to know what he was.
In another response, you said you never spoke to him again when you found out. Why were you in court?
Because he was my father. I attended with my mother until they started shoving cameras in our faces. Last I saw my father, he was in an orange jumpsuit, about 35 feet away from me.
Have you contact with any other children of serial killers, kinda like a support group?
I've interacted with a few, but most of us really prefer our privacy. We all already know what it was like and honestly avoid reminders. However, if any others come across this want to talk, I welcome you to inbox me.
And thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and drop a comment. See you in the next one.